All right, this is the Bleav in Buckeye podcast, and we have a special guest today.
A very special guest.
All right.
Very special. Our first guest.
A
very special
Buckeye.
guest. A Buckeye.
As well.
Right. So we have Breer here, who's currently with got a lot of jobs. Currently with Sports Illustrated, Fox News, NBC. Formerly worked with
NFL
Network, Boston Globe, Dallas. So he's seasoned. It's like seasoned reporter. And he's currently running the Monday Morning Quarterback Club, and I Bleav you do that for Sports Illustrated. Okay.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So we're excited. We're excited to have you. Thanks for taking your time and meeting with us. Like I say, you're first guest on our short-lived show. So it's like history.
Right.
That's a great honor. It's a great honor.
And you are a Buckeye.
Yep.
You went to Ohio State. And if you would just be comfortable telling us a little bit about what brought you to Ohio State, being a guy who grew up in the Massachusetts area, right?
Right.
Yeah, sure. I grew up outside of Boston. My dad is from Detroit. And most of my family went to Michigan or Michigan State. And so, I always thought, if you grow up here, outside of Boston, a lot of people go to smaller colleges. That wasn't, I didn't think that was college. You know what I mean? I think if you went to a school with, 5,000 people, that's, overgrown high school. You know what I mean?
No offense to all you small college people.
Yeah. I always wanted, the big football school, and so, I had, a lot of experience with my family having gone to, Big Ten schools with Michigan and Michigan State. And, I had a guy I played high school football with who's a year older than me. He was a priority walk-on at Ohio State during the John Cooper years, named Eddie Brown. Still lives in Columbus, actually, and still a really good friend of mine. And, he had sort of told me, you're looking at Michigan and Michigan State, you got to look at Ohio State too. And I went out there during a football recruiting weekend, which was kind of wild. I'm not sure if the other people knew I was a recruit or not. But yeah, I mean, it didn't take much to sell me. And that's how I ended up there. And obviously, you guys can tell by looking at my tweets, I had a pretty good time when I was there too. I definitely my time there.
It's not hard to sell Ohio State, especially
it's not.
A young kid looking for a place to spend the next 4 or 5 years. I'm interested in you getting into doing what you do now.
Yeah.
What got you to this point? Was it at Ohio State, or was it something that you always wanted to do?
I mean, honestly, it's actually sort of interesting. My dad, so I when I was a kid, I loved all sports. And football was the sport I loved the most. And, my dad had a huge influence on me getting into football. I didn't have anybody in my family that had been in journalism though. And, my grades weren't great my first couple of years in high school to say the least. And so he thought I had to, hey, you ought to get some more things in your college application or you're gonna have a problem here, And so, he sort of looked at it and said, you're passionate about sports. Why don't we find something that you can do that involves sports, And so he called the newspaper in town, which was just the one community weekly newspaper, and talked to the sports editor there. The sports editor called me, said, hey, would you want to, just write off of the football games you're playing in? So I wrote off the football games I played in as a junior in high school. And I guess they did a good enough job where they brought me back and said, hey, would you want to do this for like a team you're not playing for? So I covered the girls basketball team for that paper that winter. And, as a high school kid, it was I was getting $50 a story, which at that point, I think this is easy. I'm going to keep doing this. And, you just slowly get better at it. And, I'll tell you, the main thing about it, for me was it didn't really feel like work. You know what I mean? I like doing it. And, I was never a very good writer, but I just could write about football. You know what I mean? I guess it just sort of came through that, this is something I was passionate about and something I could do. And so then, I sort of looked at, how would I get involved in sports after high school? And this was sort of an avenue to do it, and so, I get to Ohio State and I start writing for the Lantern when I'm there, some journalism major, and that sort of opened some avenues for some television internships, and sort of one thing led to another. I'd say I really wanted to be involved in football. Like I knew that I don't think I'd be doing this like covering any other sport. Like I don't think I would have had the drive to do it covering any other sport. I love football. And, it's just one thing led to another. And I knew I wanted to be involved in that specific sport. And this was just something I found that I guess I was relatively good at,
Yeah. So I find it interesting that, like you say, your first couple of stories was basically reporting for the team that you're playing for.
Right.
How biased was those first couple stories? I'm sure, like, hey, we did everything right, and it was the referees.
It was definitely weird, but you know what? Like, honestly, like I liked doing it. You know what I mean? Like, and it was like I would talk to my teammates about what would go in there, and I think there's like some valuable lessons you gain. I mean, I think the stuff that you do that you realize carries over into anything is like relationship building, and like when I was doing that, like I had to manage my own relationships on the team. You know what I mean? What I was writing a lot of times was stuff that would get clipped and would like get put in the paper, right? And like somebody's parents would like have that up like on the bulletin board or whatever, like, hey, my kid's name's in the paper. Like it really, like, I think doing it at that age because, and even when I was covering like the girls basketball team that winter, like I was friends with all those girls, you know what I mean? Like, so it sort of taught you like relationship building and accountability and all that different stuff, you know what I mean? Like, and so, it was a little weird at first, but I do think there were some like interesting lessons, like actually doing it first that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Now you went to Ohio State. Did you go here during the Cooper?
Years? So we were actually like relatively mediocre when I was there. Like like my freshman year my freshman year was the year Andy Katzenmoyer was in the cover of Sports Illustrated, and they wrote the story about how he was taking basket weaving or whatever, and but we were number one in the country, and we lost that year to Michigan State. Saban was the coach at Michigan State. On like there's a block punt. They came back from way behind, and that Ohio State team was great, and blew everybody else out. But like lost that one game and cost us the national title. I think Tennessee won the national title that year. And then after that, it was 6-6 my sophomore year. Then I think 8-4 my junior year, and Cooper got fired, and Tress came in the middle of my junior year. So my senior year would have been Tressel's first full year, or his first year as head coach. They beat Michigan at the end of that year, and then they won the national title right after I left.
Okay.
So I caught like the most mediocre period.
Like, we think about the 90s teams. For me growing up, I was obviously younger at the time, a kid. But you just think the 90s teams, a lot of talent, with just like kind of always a little bit underperformed, but this had a lot of
my freshman year, like the corners they had 3 first-round picks at corner. It was Antoine Winfield, Nate Clements, and Ahmad Plummer were the three corners. They had a safety named Damon Moore, who was a starter right away, who hurt his neck in the pros, was starter right away in the pros, and then Andy Katzenmoyer and Niall Diggs. It's like, I think if I remember right, every starter off of that team my freshman year on defense, every starter on defense played in the NFL, which is insane.
That's crazy.
So give us some advice, because we're not used to, at least me personally, I didn't grow up as a Buckeye fan. I'm not used to losing to the team up north, right? So I haven't experienced, 2 in a row.
It sucks.
How do we navigate this time?
How do we get better, right?
As a fan.
Well, I mean, I think like blocking some people's phone numbers can help. I have enough Michigan people in my life, both family and otherwise, that I had to hear a lot of it over the last couple of weeks. I don't know, man. Like it was weird because it almost did feel like one of those 90s games, like where I felt like we could have been up by 20 in the first half if a couple of things go differently. If you make the tackle on Johnson there on the sideline and you have a little help over the top, there for, I think it was Cam Martinez, right? Like, and then you convert some of your opportunities. Cade Stover catches the ball like that. There are little things, and it felt like it was right there, and you just left the door open. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, and so I don't know if there's any great advice I have for dealing with it, because I haven't dealt with it a lot either. I mean, I honestly, like when I was there, so we won my freshman year. We beat Michigan my freshman year.
Yeah.
Lost sophomore and junior year, but that was when like that was sort of like the low point. Like that was when Cooper was like on the ropes.
Yeah.
And then my senior year, crazy story. Like I don't know if you guys are probably too young to remember this, but like quarterback gets a DUI two nights before the Illinois game. And so our starting quarterback, Steve Belisari, was out for the Michigan game. And that's how Craig Krenzel became, like, that was his first big game, was against Michigan. They beat Michigan. And then I think we've lost what, it was 2 times from then until like just the last couple of years. So
that's something I guess you could speak to, is like, I guess you got to really see the culture change, right? From how things are being ran with the football team with Cooper, and then Tressel coming in. I know obviously his memorable first speech is, in front of the basketball team saying how we're going to beat Michigan. So how would you rate, I guess, the culture of the team kind of in that?
So Brian, you're from Ohio and Chimney, you're not, right?
Right. Uh-huh.
Right. Okay. So I would say like one of the things that was interesting was I was actually doing radio with Brady Quinn, and he remembered this, which was interesting because it was around when he was in high school. Okay. I don't know if you guys remember the name Ryan Brewer, but he was a running back for South Carolina way back. This little like white running back who was Mr. Ohio, and Ohio State didn't offer him. And then 2 years in a row, I think it was in the Outback Bowl, like just this kid lit them up, right? And the whole criticism of Cooper was like, he's gone too national, and he's missing on too many kids who are right there in Ohio, and he's alienated the high school coaches in Ohio. And so, really what it was, like with Tressel was like, I want to restore pride in the program, and I want to build a fence around the state. And we're not going to let any great player get out of here. And, I can, in the 90s, if you really look back at it, like Ohio State would routinely lose like a really good Cleveland player to Michigan, or a really good Cincinnati player to Notre Dame. That would happen a lot. Yeah. And then Tressel comes in, and that stops, and like all of a sudden now there's a fence around the state. And I think it coincided with some of the other Big Ten programs sort of taking a downturn. And, that was sort of like a whole lot of it, I think, was like sort of restoring some of the tradition and pride in the program. And I think Coop, to his credit, like he did a lot of things that were needed. Like they needed to start recruiting nationally. You know what I mean? Like they needed to go into Florida and to go into Texas and go into California. And like when I was there, some of the great players, David Boston was from Texas, Niall Diggs, I believe, was from California. We had a ton of kids from Florida on the team. Like even the championship team that the Tress won with, like Michael Jenkins, Chris Campbell, those guys are from Florida.
Right.
So like it was sort of like Tressel did a good job, I think, of, at least from my view, it was he restored the pride in the state and the connections in the state that they needed to have, and building a fence around the state, making sure that guys like you, Bryant, grew up wanting to go to school there and had them at the top of the list no matter what, while also like leveraging everything that Cooper had built and still bringing in the national kids,
Yeah, that's and interesting that you say that, because it's like a wave, right? It's like a wave, because like you kind of seen that from Tressel to Meyer and Day. Now that they're getting more national with recruits, and then after we lose to Michigan, like there's like a buzz on Twitter, like Coach Day is not doing a good enough job in Ohio.
I'll tell you what, like it's like a lot of the stuff you're hearing, like now, is exactly what people were saying about Cooper 25 years ago. Exactly. It's he doesn't care enough about the state, like all of that. Like, and I don't think it's necessarily fair to Ryan.
No.
But it's the same sort of thing that you would hear back then. And I can just remember like so much of it was because there were definitely like high school coaches in the state of Ohio that felt like they had been alienated, or that their programs weren't getting enough attention from Ohio State back then, like in the 90s, when Ohio State was going outside the state to go and get like great players from elsewhere. And, the truth is, I think like Coop took a lot of bullets that somebody at some point was going to have to take regardless. You know what I mean? That was going to have to happen at some point, because there was no way it was just, like look at Alabama. Alabama doesn't just recruit in state. You know what I mean? Like Georgia, as great as they are and as good as like Atlanta is at producing talent, like they've got a lot. Like those two big tight ends they have, I think one of them's from California and the other one's from Nevada. You know what I mean? Like, so everybody has to do this. And I think Coop, like, you know, it was a time like Coop like took some bullets that somebody at some point was going to have to take.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Let's just talk about the college football awards, and I don't know how much you've really.
You want to talk about how Marvin Harrison got screwed?
Yes, that's really what I was going with. Top receiver in the nation, and I'm gonna be honest. I wear a lot of bias because I watch every Ohio State football game. I didn't watch every Tennessee game. I watched a few of them. I watched a lot of the big ones. But man, when you look at these receivers play, is Marvin Harrison not the best?
I don't know how. I honestly like, and yeah, I'm biased too. Right? I know what show I'm on here, but like, I honestly, like, I don't know how you could watch that kid play, and not think like that's one of the best college receivers I've ever seen. You know, I've talked to like NFL scouts about this through like the course of doing my own job. I mean, when people start talking about like this guy when he comes out is in like the Julio Jones, AJ Green category, which is like, you know, like those aren't every year guys. Like that's a once in every few years, a guy like this comes along. Like I think Jamar Chase was one guy that was like spoken about in that category. Well, look what he became. You know what I mean? Like, so when you start to hear people talk about a guy like that in that category, Jalen Hyatt's a nice player. You know what I mean? Like Jalen Hyatt's a really nice player. But if we're not basing this on statistics, if we're basing this on impact of the game and things that a guy opens up for everybody else, and like I don't know how it wouldn't be Marvin Harrison. And I'd imagine that this has got to be pretty frustrating for Hart too. After like the last couple of years of what he's had in his position room, you know what I mean? Like where like last year he didn't even have a finalist. I mean, look at what Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave are doing in the pros right now. And then consider Jackson Smith and Jigba had better stats than those two last year. And you couldn't get one of those guys as a finalist for the Blitnikoff Awards. Like they cancel each other out. And then you come back this year and it's like, okay, now we've got a guy who is like defined as the number one here. And you still don't. I mean, it's just, to me, it was like, I'd imagine it'd be really, really frustrating if you're Harlan.
From a media standpoint, do you feel like the challenge is the amount of talent? You know, when you looked at Garrett Wilson and Olave and JSN, Smith and Jigba, there was so much talent across the board, and you had CJ Stroud at quarterback. Do you think there's a punishment for
being too good?
I think that exists. Like I honestly think like Caleb Williams absolutely deserves the Heisman. I would have voted for him, right? But without question, like if you're looking at, and look, like I've taken this sort of stuff into account when I voted for awards too. Like who means the most to their team is usually a pretty big factor, right? Like, so like Caleb Williams is going to be looked at a certain way because look at how many new people they have there, right? The coach is new, the system's new. You've got, Jordan Addison, Mario Williams, all these people coming in from different programs. The offensive line had turnover. Like, there's all this new stuff, and they were on the doorstep of the college football playoff. So, of course, you are and you should look beyond the statistics, right? Like, you should. You should say, like, okay, like the degree of difficulty here for Caleb Williams is damn high, and he cleared it. And so, like, he deserves a ton of credit. If you compare him to, like, against, like, okay, like Stetson Bennett, where it's like, they have 5 stars all over the place. They've got 2 guys at tight end that are probably both going to be first-round picks. They have a backfield full of NFL guys. And, oh, by the way, they've got a defense that makes it so a lot of weeks you don't need to score more than a couple touchdowns to win the game, right? So, like, that's always going to be a factor. But my argument with Marvin would be you lost 2 first-round picks, 2 high first-round picks who have already proven themselves at the NFL level. And then you lost a 3rd guy on the fly who will also be a first-round pick.
Right.
So, like, there was that the production at that position had been cleaned out almost altogether. And he came in, and not only was he a great player on his own, now, like, how much did he mean to Julian Fleming and Emeka Egbuka, right? Like, how much did he mean to those guys because he's opening things up for them, right? How much did he mean to you in the running game because you got to account for the guy running down the field? I get what you're making, like that argument, like, is definitely a factor with this stuff. But I actually think, like, and you could have used it against those guys last year, right?
Right.
You'd be like, all right, well, like, this guy isn't seeing a lot of double coverage, or they aren't rolling things towards him quite as much just because there are 3 of them out there. Like, that argument should work for Marvin Harris.
Yeah, exactly.
I think, right?
Right.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so, because with the awards, obviously, CJ was up for several, obviously, just basically 2 years in a row, he was up for several awards. Obviously, didn't win any. And now we're at a point now we're kind of heading to the playoffs. And once again, Ohio State was essentially snubbed. I mean, not snubbed, but we didn't win anything, right, for when it came to those awards. Do you think going into the playoffs, in your experience with the Ohio State not having this type of success with the awards and not being recognized, it kind of propels them to kind of maybe do a little bit more when it comes to these
I hope so. Were either you guys, I'm trying to remember, were either of you guys on the 14 team?
No, we're younger. So we
finished with Tressel. So Tressel last year was our senior year. Finished.
Okay. Yeah.
So we went to
you guys never played for Urban. Okay.
Yeah, played for Urban.
I was trying to do it in my head. I should have looked you guys up before. So that's my bad.
You're the guest. We do the homework.
When you get to my age, everything kind of blends together.
So we went to 2 national championships. When we was true freshmen, we played Florida in the national championship against Meyer, where we lost by a lot. Yeah. Then our second year, we played
LSU.
Yeah.
But I think that sort of thing worked against you guys again in the Florida game. Like Florida, I think used it 100%. Like, and I would say in 14, like, there's no question. It's like, oh, they got a backup quarterback. They just snuck in. Like, they don't have the horses to run with Alabama.
Right.
Well, now we look at that team and it sounds like ridiculous that anybody would think that they didn't have the horses to run with anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I was at that game too. Yeah.
And I sort of think that this is like this could be. I think a lot of it's going to come down to where the mindset of the team is and everything else. And you guys can speak to that better than I can. But I do think that there's enough out there that they don't belong, that they backed in, that Michigan kicked their ass, that some people thought it would be a good idea to plant a flag on a field and may have to pay for it sooner than they ever thought they'd have to pay for it.
Right.
All that stuff.
Yes.
I mean, all that stuff's out there for them. You know what I mean? Like, so I think that, and I do think, like, if you look at it, there are some similarities to the 14 team in the sophomore class, because that sophomore class, I don't need to go through the names with you guys, but like Bosa, Zeke, Taylor Decker, I think was a little older then. Like that group, there was younger guys in that team that all kind of came together at once.
Yeah.
And, like they all grew up together at once. It felt like all those guys sort of came of age at the exact same time. And so, you look at the sophomores on this year's team and, it's Marvin, it's JTT, it's Sawyer, it's, Henderson, it's Egbuka, like all these guys. Like, I think the opportunity is there where it's like, these guys are like potentially elite players.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And a lot of people are telling them they don't belong.
Right.
And they've got a real chance to show they belong. So I think that that's where maybe the motivation would be if they have the right mindset over the next 4 or 5 weeks getting ready.
Yeah, and we see the talent. They have the talent. They can match up talent-wise. But what we saw in that Michigan game was talent not actually executing in the way that they should. And, took, 4 or 5 – you could probably count 4 or 5 plays that really determined the entire game in that Michigan game. So, if you clean that stuff up, you give yourself an opportunity.
You know what's interesting about it, too? How many 4th and 5th and 6th year guys Michigan has? If you, look at their roster, I think one thing that an NFL guy brought up to me that was really interesting was he said, about that matchup, he said, you've got a lot of 4th and 5th round picks, like NFL guys on Michigan's roster that are 4th and 5th and 6th year guys. So essentially what you have is a team that's full of mid-round picks, but older mid-round picks, right? Mm-hmm. So you have guys that are 2 or 3 years older and more mature. And then you have a bunch of first-round picks at Ohio State that are 19 or 20 years old.
Right.
And so I thought that was really an interesting way to look at it. And COVID plays into that too, because a lot of guys got the extra year too. But it's sort of interesting that way. You look at Michigan's program, they've got a lot of guys who are just below the elite level. They're really good players, that wound up hanging around as a result, And so now it's like you've got an older team of like mid-round picks and a younger team of first-round picks. And, hopefully we get to see him again and our guys do some growing up between now.
Yeah, right. A lot of old guys in general right now because of the COVID years. That's event is 25?
Yeah, they say was born the same year as Lamar Jackson. That's interesting.
Is that right? Is that true?
Yeah. I think
he was born the same year as Lamar Jackson.
It's crazy.
I think they're both born in '96. I want to say. Yeah, I think '96. That's like the.
That's nuts.
So I did want to get your take on Jackson.
I should have stayed in college that long.
So Jackson Smith-Njigba not playing in the playoffs. Obviously, he dealt with the injury.
Yep.
All year, essentially made the decision to kind of focus on what's coming next in the NFL. I just want to get what's your overall take on that decision, and really just in general. I know there's different than when we played. There was not much. We didn't like. I remember being hurt. I remember playing injured, and not thinking about the overall context of what I was doing. Right. I thought about it later when I got to NFL, and I was like, this injury I played with for 2 years. I probably should have sat down for a few games. I probably should have addressed it. But I didn't have – when playing in college, I didn't have that level of, context. I was really just trying to listen, what do we have to do to win the next game? What do you think about the transition in college now with guys, probably having a little bit more advisor or, more agents or whatever – giving
more people around them,
more people around them just to figure out, how do we make the decision and, JSN specific decision, to really just to focus on what's next.
Yeah, let's I'll talk about Jackson specifically in a second. I just think in general terms, right? Like this is the reality, officially they can't become their agents, but let's call it what it is. Like the NIL, representatives a lot of times are NFL agents, and they're going to become the guy's NFL agents. And I can tell you, I can go through a list of guys now where I could tell you at the beginning of this season who their agent was going to be in the NFL. And it didn't work that way before. You know what I mean? So the fact that they can get to the kids earlier means in a lot of cases, the agent is going to be, his focus is going to be, what can I do to make sure that he gets to the NFL healthy and make sure that he gets to the NFL in the optimal position to perform at combine and pro day. And I think that can work against a player sometimes too, because if a team sees a player handling things that way, they're going to have questions.
Yeah.
So now what's going to happen at the end of your contract, right? Are you going to start to play it safe at the end of your contract? Are you going to pull yourself out of stuff? Am I going to be able to count on you later when that situation in college becomes an NFL situation?
Right.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. I think we've started to see kids, and I think this is a good development. Kids have more information now, and I just think if you look at it, when Christian McCaffrey and Leonard Fournette opted out, I think it was 2000, it'd been the end of the 16 season because they were in the 17 draft. When they opted out, that was whoa.
Right.
Look back at it, and it's Christian McCaffrey was opting out of the Sun Bowl. Now it looks like such an easy decision to make. You know what I mean? The guy was the 8th pick in the draft. But both those guys were running backs, and they were cognizant of, I only have so many miles on my legs.
Right.
And it's only going to last so long. So I need to save the miles while I can. So that's a challenging balance, I think, for players because they want to do what's best for their teammates. They also want to show their competitors to the NFL, but there's the real life business proposition of the whole thing, and so I think that part of it is a reality for everybody. Jackson, everything I've heard about the kid is A+, right? So it sounds like he's a great kid, and I know having talked to some of the coaches there, they think the world of him. They think he's going to be a really good pro. I don't know if he's as physically talented as Wilson and Olave. Now, I think Wilson and Olave would tell you maybe he's a better football player. I don't know that he's going to run as fast as those guys did. I don't know he's quite as explosive as those guys are. I think he probably finds a way to stay in the first round. But, I do think there's some questions football-wise that he has to answer. And now I think he's also going to have to answer the question, did you choose the combine over the playoff? I don't know that that's necessarily fair, Because from everything I've heard, like that was a freakish hamstring injury, and they just couldn't get it right, and they tried and they tried and they tried, and there just came a point where it was like, I don't know, there's much more we can do just other than rest it.
Yeah. How much weight do you think the NFL teams put to that question? Because I mean, sometimes there's a question they ask, like, there's one question that I always got that is it, do you hate to lose more than you love to win, or something like that?
Right.
And you just answer the question, I hate to lose, and then that's
okay. And then it's like, how the hell do I answer it? Yeah, no, I think, but it's definitely gets thrown in the bucket, and makeup is such an important thing. Like what's inside a guy, because, Troy Brown, who I'm sure you guys are familiar with him, was a great receiver during Tom Brady's early days in New England. I did TV with Troy for a bunch of years, and Troy had this saying that I thought was really interesting. He said, money will only make you more of what you already are. And I thought that was such an interesting way to put it. It's like, if a guy is one way in college, giving him a big check isn't going to make him different. Isn't going to make him work harder. Isn't going to make, like, it's just not, 99 times out of 100, it won't. And so, like, makeup is such a big part of this for NFL teams, because they're looking at it, especially with the first round picks, saying, we're going to hand this guy an opportunity to create financial security for himself and for his family for life. And we need to know how he's going to operate in that situation when he's not fighting for it anymore, And so, like, I think with these kids now, like, that's a huge part of the question. If you're going in the first round, it's all right, like, we've turned this into a business for you now. How are you going to handle it? Are you going to push through an injury? If it's close, are you going to go? If there could be long-term damage done, are you going to go? And, it's sort of the underbelly of the NFL, but it's a reality in that, like, the injury rate in the NFL is like it is at any other level of football. It's 100%. Yep. Every team's going to have injuries every year. And, like, I just think that's something that these kids, like, that's something that like is a reality for all of these kids. And it's going to be a reality for Jackson. He's going to have to know how to answer that question. And again, like, it may not be fair to him, like, on an individual basis, based on everything that he went through. And I know how frustrating the hamstring was for him this year.
Yep.
But it's a question he's going to have to be prepared to answer. And if you answer it the wrong way, you have to understand that it could, I don't think it's going to, like, cause a team not to take you, but if they have you ranked right there with another kid, it might be a tiebreaker. And in the reality is, in the NFL draft, if it's a tiebreaker with another kid at your position, that could mean like 5, 10, 15 spots. You know what I mean? Like, that's real money that you're walking away from. So I think he very much has to be prepared to answer that question the right way.
I know one thing we also want to kind of dive in is, once again, Ohio State's quarterback, C.J. Stroud. He's been tremendous for Ohio State, put up a lot of yards, but once again, when it comes to the awards, he doesn't bring any of them home, basically off of 2 losses in a couple of years. What is your thoughts on him when you think about ranking the quarterbacks that we will obviously haven't made a decision yet, but most likely we'll see in this draft?
Yeah, I think he's going, and I think he's in, like, sort of this group of 4. I would say 4 quarterbacks that are, like, I feel like this is one of those years where you're going to have to be comfortable with the guy's flaws, and you're going to have to be comfortable with, like, the idea that the guy could work past them. So Bryce Young, I think by all accounts, like, I think has the cleanest tape, right? Like, and like, if he was 6'4", he'd probably be slam dunk number 1 overall pick. Yeah. He's not 6'4". You know what I mean? He's not 225 pounds. So with him, the question is going to be size. Will Levis from Kentucky had a great junior year, not as good as senior year. How much of it was the system he was playing in? He wasn't great at Penn State. So you're looking at, like, physical tools that he has. Like, he's big, he's strong, he's got a big arm, but, like, you've only really seen it in one season, and it was with an offensive coordinator who was doing a lot of things to help him. So how much of that was smoke and mirrors, how much of it is actually indicative of his potential? Then Anthony Richardson's the one who's really raw and has a ways to go, but he shows traits. So it's like, he's one of these cases where it's like, you see everything you need to see. It just takes a lot of tape to get there. Yeah. So how, like, can you turn who he is in flashes into who he is all the time? Mm-hmm. And then I think with CJ, the biggest question is going to be how much can he improve when things are jumbled around him and when things are a mess around him. And for better or worse, like there's a little bit of that reputation of being a 7-on-7 quarterback. So like, how does he react? Like when the pocket's muddy and he has to move, how does he react? Can he keep his eyes downfield after he gets hit? How does he play after he gets hit? When there's 10 yards for him to take there in the running game, is he willing to tuck it and run? Like those are the questions that CJ is going to have to answer. And again, like all four of those guys have, I think, have relatively significant flaws. And I think for teams that are, planning to take one in the top 10, top 15 picks, a lot of it's going to be based on whose flaws am I most comfortable with. And that's something that I think you really sort of have to suss out through the pre-draft process. And that's why those interviews and the combine stuff, all that stuff is so important, because you're trying to figure out who is going to be able to work through their flaws and who isn't. And by the way, CJ's got a great opportunity to answer some of those questions against a really, really good defense on New Year's Eve.
That's going to be my question. I mean, it seems like there's a great opportunity, like you mentioned, going up against a Georgia defense that is has really been impressive. And you talk about how does he respond when he gets hit. It's a good chance he's going to get hit against Georgia.
I don't think they'll be able to keep Jalen Carter off completely.
With that guy, you usually get hit hard, right?
So to that point, college football prediction, and we know the 4 teams that are in it. And also, so one part of the prediction is the TCU versus Michigan. Who do you want to win that game? Right? And because there's always this thing, no Buckeyes, there's almost a split, right? Some never can root for Michigan or even consider the fact that they want them to win. And others say, I want Michigan to win this game and then go match up against Ohio State so that we can, knock them off their high horse. So what camp do you?
I sort of want them to win. The plus to them losing would be that we remain the only Big Ten team that's won in the college football playoff, which would be nice. I sort of want them to win, and I'm a little torn on it because it would be kind of hilarious if we were in the national title game and they weren't. But no, I mean, I think like the idea of seeing us versus them, we got a huge mountain to climb to even think about getting there because Georgia's great. But it would be really cool to see Michigan, Ohio State at SoFi on whatever it is, January 9th. So I would say I begrudgingly would be rooting for them there.
Yeah, I'm on that same, but I want the rematch. I think last episode, I'm one of the guys that I want Michigan to win every game. I want them on the highest horse possible when they play Ohio State and we knock them off. So what better way than the national championship game? We're both there. And we take it to them. So.
But we've already determined if that happens and we beat them, I'm going to get a block gold flag. All right, we're going to drive to Ann Arbor. We're going to find a good place to plant that flag. So if you're willing to take that trip,
if you want to ride, just
I'll meet you in Ann Arbor. You guys want to meet me at the 50-yard
line? And Albert, just thank you. Appreciate.
Hey, wait a minute. How would you guys have reacted if they tried to do that to you?
See. I feel like we would have fought.
We would have fought,
right?
I mean,
but I feel it's different. Cause I know the guys there, they get a lot of heat for it, but it's like they didn't win the game, and when teams came to the middle, came out with a flag. Like once the guys that was actually playing was down, sinking Carmen, Ohio, halfway up the tunnel, this takes place. So. We had an incident like this when we was in school. We lost to Illinois. That was our
lost Illinois. It was senior day. It was ranked number 1. Juice Williams, Rashad Mendenhall. They had Monte Davis.
I remember that team.
Pretty solid team.
And they called themselves stumping on the block. So where and in, they go to the middle. How everybody comes to the middle. And they call themselves stumping on the block O.
And Malcolm Jenkins probably was the first one to kind of just jump in the sea of Illinois. And everybody, I mean, at that point, everybody had to follow.
Had to follow suit there. Now it's different. Now they really didn't even make the news. That's what took place. So that's another coward move.
Malcolm can take care of himself too. So Malcolm's not the person you want to be.
Right, exactly. So I feel like it was like a coward move. I feel like they waited, and now that everybody's gone, oh, now we're doing this extra Sunday. I just feel like the whole thing was extra.
I just thought it was interesting that the school that called the cops when somebody tried to fight them in the tunnel is planting flags.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of. But that's what type of program they run. That's what type of crew they are, man.
So, Albert, again, thank you for your time, man. Really appreciate the interview. You are our first interviewee, right?
Yeah,
so,
first guest.
All right. Well, I'm glad we got the technical stuff worked out. I'm happy to come back on with you guys anytime. Hopefully maybe we could do it ahead of the national championship game.
Yes. Yeah, that'd be fun. That would be fun.
Yeah. We'll get your prediction. We'll also get your commitment on taking that trip to Ann Arbor with a flag.
Right.
I may or may not have snuck in that stadium before and taken something, so we can tell that story.
There we go.
So you know how to get in. Okay, perfect.
You got a map. Okay.
All right, man. Thanks again.
All right, thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.